Clara Ruiz thought she was just performing a simple act of kindness when she started giving the leftover bread from her bakery to the homeless man who sat out front every afternoon. Dave was 70 years old, dressed in worn out clothes, with a gentle but sad expression that broke her heart. For 3 months, Clara brought him food, hot coffee, and a few words of comfort without ever prying into his life. Jose seemed like just a poor old man the world had forgotten. But what Clara didn't know was that this humble, kind man was actually Jose Mendoza, Madrid's wealthiest businessman, owner of a 500 million euro empire. He had lost everything else: his family, his faith in people, his will to live, but not his money. He had taken to the streets to escape the pain, pretending to be poor to find out if genuine, selfless kindness still existed. And when he finally revealed his true identity to Clara, what happened next changed both their lives forever. Every afternoon at 6:30, as Clara Ruiz pulled down the shutter at her bakery, Golden Wheat, on Madrid's bustling Main Street, she would find him there, sitting on the church steps across the way, a threadbare blanket over his shoulders, and a backpack holding everything he owned. Jose was 70, but looked at least 10 years older. His clothes were clean but patched, his white beard long and unkempt, his wrinkled hands always clutching a book. Clara had noticed he read a lot, and that intrigued her. He wasn't the typical homeless person you'd expect to see outside a bakery in Madrid's historic center. Clara was 25 and had been working in the family bakery since she was 16. Her parents, Manuel and Carmen Ruiz, had opened the place 30 years earlier and raised her surrounded by the smells of fresh bread and loyal customers. She was a big-hearted young woman, always ready to help anyone in need. The bakery always had leftovers at closing. Instead of throwing them out, Clara made a habit of saving them for those who could use them. That first September afternoon, when she saw Jose gazing wearily at the sunset over Madrid's rooftops, she grabbed a bag of fresh bread and crossed the street. Jose looked up as she approached. His eyes were a striking blue, clear and intelligent, nothing like what you'd expect from someone living on the streets. There was something noble about him, despite his humble clothes. Clara offered the bag with a shy smile. Jose stared at her for a long moment, as if weighing something important. Then he accepted it with gratitude that touched her more than she expected. From that day on, it became a routine that repeated every evening for 3 months. Clara would finish work, pack a bag with bread, focaccia, and leftover pastries, and bring it to Jose. At first, they talked little, but as the days passed, their conversations grew. He knew Madrid better than any tour guide, sharing stories about buildings and monuments she'd never heard, even though she'd been born and raised in the city. But whenever Clara asked about his past, Jose changed the subject or gave vague answers. She started bringing him hot coffee in a thermos, a blanket when the nights turned colder, medicine when he coughed. She didn't do it out of obligation or to ease her conscience. She did it because Jose had gotten under her skin. There was something about him, a old-fashioned gentleness, a wisdom born from a life fully lived and deeply suffered. Clara's parents were skeptical at first. Manuel especially didn't like her paying so much attention to a stranger. But Carmen, after watching Jose from the bakery window a few times, came around. He was a good man. You could tell from how he thanked her and spoke with respect. For his part, Jose looked forward to Clara's arrival each afternoon, not just for the food, but for those few minutes of real human connection, the only warmth in his day. Clara never judged him, never asked awkward questions, and treated him with respect and dignity. What the young woman didn't know is that Jose spent his days observing Madrid's people. Sitting on the church steps or a park bench, he watched tourists, shopkeepers, college students. He saw how they treated those less fortunate, how they reacted to a homeless man. Most ignored him. Some tossed a coin without looking. Others treated him like urban furniture to avoid. Only Clara had stopped. Only she had seen him as a person, not a problem. And that meant more to Jose than she could imagine, because Jose Mendoza, hidden beneath the worn clothes and long beard, was conducting the most important experiment of his life, finding out if selfless kindness, if true love for one's neighbor, still existed in the world. 2 months after their first meeting, Jose started sharing bits of his story with Clara. Not the whole truth, but enough to explain why a man his age was living on the streets while eating the bread she'd brought. Sitting on the church steps as the sun set behind the royal palace, Jose spoke of a family he'd had and lost. A wife who died of cancer 5 years earlier, children who lived far away and no longer kept in touch, a house that was too big and silent to bear. Sometimes he said in a hoarse voice, when you lose everything you love, even money loses its meaning. You're left with a pile of things that can't fill the hole in your heart. Clara listened intently, noticing how his eyes clouded with sadness when he talked about the past. She didn't press with too many questions. It felt like delicate territory, still raw with pain. Jose told her how after his wife's death, he'd started feeling out of place in his own life. The friends he had were only interested in his business. His kids called only when they needed money. The house was full of memories that hurt too much. What Jose didn't tell Clara was the full truth. He didn't mention that the too big house was a 3,000 square meter mansion on the outskirts of Madrid. He didn't say the meaningless money was a 500 million euro fortune built over 40 years in real estate and finance. He didn't reveal that Mendoza Holdings was one of Spain's most powerful companies. Jose Mendoza had been born into a poor family in Lavapiés. He started working at 14 as a messenger, then opened a small real estate agency that grew into an empire. He married Elena at 30 and had 3 children, Miguel, Lucia, and Andres. But success came at a cost. The bigger the company grew, the more Jose worked. Meetings, trips, late-night negotiations. He'd given his kids everything money could buy, but never the time they needed. When Elena got sick, Jose realized that in 40 years of marriage, he'd spent more time at the office than with his wife. He tried to make up for it in her final 2 years, but lost time can't be regained. Elena died holding his hand, and in her eyes he saw silent reproach. After the funeral, his children circled like vultures over her belongings. Miguel wanted to sell the mansion. Lucia claimed the family jewelry. Andres demanded the sports car. None seemed to care about Jose's grief or loneliness. That's when Jose made the most drastic decision of his life. He left everything in the hands of his trusted deputy, Esteban Ruiz, with instructions not to disturb him. He took some old clothes, grew out his beard, and started living on the streets. Not because he lacked money. He could afford any luxury in the world. He did it to discover something his 500 million couldn't buy, whether people were still capable of loving others without expecting anything in return. In the early months, he traveled Spain, Barcelona, Valencia, Seville, Bilbao. Everywhere the story was the same. Indifference, disdain, or at best condescending pity. Someone might toss a coin. A charity would offer a hot meal, but no one saw him as a person. Until he came to Madrid and met Clara, she treated him like a human being. She looked him in the eye when she spoke, cared about his opinions, laughed at his jokes, worried when he seemed down. There was no pity in her actions, just genuine respect and affection. One afternoon, Jose told Clara she'd given him back something he thought he'd lost forever. Hope that good people still existed. Clara blushed at the compliment, saying simply that he was a good person who deserved to be treated with respect. Jose looked into her eyes and was tempted to tell her everything, to reveal who he really was, take her to his mansion, give her everything her kindness deserved. But he held back. He wasn't ready. He needed to be sure her affection was real, not swayed by the promise of wealth. What he didn't know was that he was about to face a tougher test than he expected. On the afternoon of November 15, everything changed. Madrid had been hammered by torrential rain for 3 days, and temperatures had plummeted. Jose, who usually slept in a sheltered spot under the arcades of Plaza Mayor, couldn't find anywhere dry that night. Clara found him the next morning, shivering with fever, soaked through and pale as a ghost. He'd collapsed on the church steps, unconscious, his body temperature dangerously low. Without hesitation, she called an ambulance and rode with him to Gregorio Marañón Hospital. For 3 days, Jose hovered between life and death. Doctors spoke of severe pneumonia, complications from age and malnutrition. Clara never left his side, missing work and ignoring her parents' complaints. They didn't understand why she was sacrificing so much for a stranger. They were terrible days. Jose delirious with fever, calling out names Clara didn't recognize. Elena, Miguel, Lucia, and muttering about businesses, contracts millions of euros. The doctor said it was normal in high fevers. Patients often fantasized about lives they'd never lived. When Jose opened his eyes on the fourth day and saw Clara asleep in the chair beside his bed, hair messy, face marked by exhaustion, something broke inside him. This young woman had risked her job, spent her savings on his medicine, slept in an uncomfortable chair for 3 straight nights, all for a homeless man she knew nothing about. He watched her sleep, noticing the dark circles under her eyes, her chapped hands because she'd given him her gloves, the jacket she used as a blanket. In 40 years of marriage and business, no one had ever done for him what Clara was doing, commentati. When Clara woke and saw him conscious, she burst into joyful tears. She hugged him without thinking, happy as if she'd found a lost father. In that moment, Jose knew he had to tell her the truth. He couldn't keep lying to someone who'd shown him such selfless love. But first, one final test. The next day, when Jose was discharged, he told Clara he had to leave. He'd gotten a vague call about a job opportunity in another city. He might be gone for good. Clara's face fell, but she didn't try to stop him. She understood he had to think about his future. Jose had set a cruel trap. He said he had a problem. No money for the trip. He needed 200 euros, a huge sum for a bakery clerk, but essential for his fresh start. Clara didn't hesitate. She'd get it, she said firmly. Jose knew those 200 euros were everything Clara had saved through months of sacrifice. Sacrifice. To raise them, she'd have to sell something precious or take out a loan she couldn't repay. It was a harsh test, but he had to be sure. The next day, Clara arrived with an envelope. Inside were 200 euros in small bills, clearly scraped together with great effort. She'd sold the gold necklace her grandmother had left her, the only valuable thing she owned. Jose took the money with trembling hands, not from cold, but emotion. Here was a young woman who'd given up her only precious family heirloom to help a homeless man start over, asking for no guarantees, expecting nothing in return. In that moment, Jose Mendoza, Madrid's richest man, started crying like a child. When he asked why she did it, Clara answered simply, he was a good person, and good people deserved a second chance. Jose looked into her eyes and made the most important decision of his life. It was time to tell the truth, the whole truth, the whole truth. Jose took Clara's hands in his and looked her straight in the eye. The moment he delayed for 3 months had finally arrived. He couldn't keep lying to someone with a heart of gold. He revealed his real name, Jose Mendoza. He wasn't what she thought. He owned Mendoza Holdings, hotels, shopping centers, land across Europe. His net worth was 500 million euros. Clara was silent for a long moment, then burst out laughing, thinking he was joking or still weak from the fever. But Jose wasn't laughing. He pulled a high-end phone from his backpack and called Esteban, his business director, on speaker. The man on the line was respectful but worried. He hadn't heard from Jose in 3 months. The company needed his decision. Jose reassured him and asked him to come the next day with all the business documents. Clara went pale as a sheet. She couldn't believe the homeless man she'd helped for 3 months was Madrid's richest businessman. Jose told her everything. Elena's death, his children's abandonment, his decision to pretend to be poor to test humanity's kindness, his disappointment in every Spanish city until he met her. In 3 months, he said, Clara had done more for him than anyone in his 70 years. She treated him like a human being, given him food, warmth, companionship, without ever asking for anything. The 200 euro test had been the final proof. He needed to know her affection was genuine, and she'd sold her grandmother's necklace to help what she thought was the homeless old man. Jose stood and pulled a small velvet box from his backpack. Inside was Clara's necklace. He'd bought it back from the jeweler that morning. It cost far more than 200 euros, but to her, its value was priceless. Clara started crying, not from joy, but confusion and hurt. She asked why he'd lied, why he'd made her think he was poor. Jose knelt before her. He explained that in 70 years, he'd learned that when people know you're rich, they change. They treat you differently, respect you for your money, not who you are. She was the only person who'd loved him for himself, not his wealth. Clara was confused and wounded. For 3 months, she'd thought she knew him, but it had all been a lie. Jose reassured her. She knew him better than anyone. She'd met the real Jose, the one no one else had ever seen. Without money, without power, without masks. The next day, his director would come to show her who he really was. But before she saw all that, Jose had something important to say. He wanted to adopt her as his daughter. He wanted to leave her everything, not out of debt, but because in those 3 months, she'd restored his faith in humanity. His biological children had forgotten him the day after their mother's funeral. Clara had watched over a sick homeless man for 3 days who truly deserved to be called his daughter. In that moment, Clara Ruiz's life, the bakery clerk's life, was about to change forever. The next morning at 10 sharp, 3 black Mercedes pulled up outside Golden Wheat Bakery. Men in elegant suits stepped out, looking around, perplexed, clearly not used to this kind of neighborhood. Clara, who'd barely slept, watched from the window, heart pounding. Her parents, Manuel and Carmen, were terrified. She told them the incredible story of the billionaire homeless man, but they struggled to believe it. Beard-trimmed, haircut, dressed in clean clothes, entered the bakery with 3 men. Esteban Ruiz, CEO of Mendoza Holdings, the company lawyer, Blanco, and the accountant. Esteban looked at Jose with relief and concern. He'd searched everywhere for him. The company needed his decisions. Contracts were pending. Jose apologized for worrying them, but said he'd needed to figure out some important things about life. Lawyer Blanco opened a briefcase and pulled out documents. Jose had instructed them to prepare legal adoption papers for Clara. Given his age, it was an unusual process, but possible. Manuel Ruiz exploded. He didn't know what was going on, but his daughter wasn't going anywhere with anyone. Jose calmed him. He was right to worry. He was a father protecting his child, but his intentions were honest. Esteban opened a tablet showing documents with staggering figures: luxury hotels, shopping centers, land, financial investments. Mendoza Holdings' worth was indeed hundreds of millions. The lawyer added that Jose had already set up a 10 million euro trust fund in Clara's name. Regardless of the adoption, it was hers. Clara could barely breathe. 10 million euros was just the start. If she became his daughter, she'd inherit everything. But even if she refused, the 10 million was already hers. Carmen sat down. Her legs were shaking. The accountant confirmed it all with bank statements, titles, certifications. Jose Mendoza wasn't just rich. He was one of Spain's wealthiest people. Manuel asked again, why Clara? Jose sat and explained to everyone. He wanted a family. His biological children had abandoned him. Clara had shown him what it meant to love someone selflessly. In 3 months, she'd given him more affection than he'd received in 70 years. He didn't want to change Clara's life against her will. If she preferred to stay at the bakery with her parents, he'd respect that. But he wanted her to know she had a family in him too. Clara said she needed time to think. Jose gave her all the time she wanted. Whatever she decided, he wanted her to know one thing. She'd saved his life, not just in the hospital, but every afternoon when she brought that bread and made him feel seen. He hugged her, thanking her for restoring his faith in humanity. In that moment, Clara realized that rich or poor, Jose was still the same gentleman she'd grown to love like a father. Maybe it really was time to give this incredible family a chance. 2 weeks after the revelation, Clara made the biggest decision of her life. She agreed to be adopted by Jose, but with one condition that surprised everyone. She wanted her biological parents to be part of the new family too. Jose didn't hesitate. He bought the entire building housing Golden Wheat Bakery. He turned the upper floors into luxury apartments for Manuel and Carmen and renovated the shop, making it Madrid's most beautiful bakery. The adoption ceremony was held in Madrid City Hall, attended by the mayor and half the city's business elite. But for Jose and Clara, the real ceremony had happened months earlier on church steps when a young woman decided to give bread to a stranger. Clara kept working at the bakery, but now she owned a chain of upscale bakeries Jose opened across Spain. Manuel and Carmen became coordinators of the bread empire, traveling the country to source ingredients and traditional recipes. Jose returned as president of Mendoza Holdings, but with a new focus. He turned the company into a benefit corporation, dedicating 30% of profits to helping the homeless and families in need. He opened shelters, soup kitchens, job training programs. At the first shelter's opening, he said he'd finally discovered what it meant to be truly rich in affection, family, and purpose. His biological children, Miguel, Lucia, and Andres, showed up when they read about the adoption and Clara's inheritance in the papers. They arrived angry, threatening lawsuits. Jose faced them calmly. They would always be his children, with a place in the company and his heart. But Clara had earned what they'd rejected, her real family. Miguel tried to contest the adoption in court, but failed. Lucia and Andres, seeing how Jose had come back to life with Clara, started visiting more, trying to rebuild neglected relationships. 1 year after the adoption, Jose turned 71. Party was held at the mansion on the outskirts, now full of life again. During the toast to 200 guests, Jose spoke. A year ago, he was Madrid's richest and loneliest man. Now he was still the richest, but no longer alone. He'd learned true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in the people who love you for who you are. Who you are. He looked at Clara, sitting beside him in an elegant dress, but with the same simple smile. His daughter had taught him that generosity doesn't need repayment to be valuable. She'd fed him when she thought he was hungry, cared for him when he was sick, loved him when she believed he was just a poor old man. Clara stood and hugged Jose in front of everyone. He'd taught her that family isn't about blood. It's about choice. He'd chosen her as his daughter, and she'd chosen him as her father. That was the most beautiful family in the world. That night, after the guests left, Jose and Clara sat in the garden watching Madrid's lights sparkle in the valley. Manuel and Carmen had gone to bed, happy to see their daughter so content. Clara thought that day she'd seen Jose on the church steps hadn't been chance. It was destiny bringing them together. Jose agreed, two lonely people who needed each other. She needed a father to give her security and opportunities. He needed a daughter to teach him how to love again. The next morning, as they did every day for the past year, they opened the bakery together. Jose put on an apron and helped Clara make fresh bread. Customers were used to seeing the millionaire kneading dough and serving at the counter with the same smile as his daughter. Jose had learned that true nobility isn't in having servants, it's in serving those you love. And Clara had discovered you can be rich without ever losing the humility and generosity that make life beautiful. Every afternoon when they closed the bakery, they always passed the church steps where it all began. And every time, Jose thanked fate for putting an angel, disguised as a bakery clerk, in his path. Because sometimes all it takes is a piece of bread offered with love to change two lives forever. And sometimes the most beautiful families are born from chosen love, not blood. Like if you believe selfless kindness can change the world. Comment which moment touched you most. Share to inspire others to keep practicing pure generosity. Subscribe for more stories of families born from the heart. Sometimes the person who seems to have the least has the richest heart. Sometimes a simple gesture hides the greatest miracle. And sometimes the most beautiful families are born from chosen love, not obligation. Because true wealth isn't counted in the bank, it's in the hearts we touch.